This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to a new book that documents how systemic prejudice against Mexicans and many other migrant workers has been woven into U.S. immigration policies that deny them the same path to citizenship that has long been granted to European immigrants. The book is by Aviva Chomsky, and it's called Undocumented: How Immigration Became Illegal.
Chomsky's previous book on this topic is They Take Our Jobs and 20 Other Myths About Immigration. She's professor of history and coordinator of Latin American studies at Salem State University in Massachusetts. And in case you're wondering, yes, she is the oldest daughter of Professor Noam Chomsky. She's joining us from Boston. Professor Chomsky, welcome to Democracy Now! Talk about this history that is not very well understood, I think, in this country.
Right, I agree that it's not very well understood. We often hear people saying this is a country of immigrants, as if that explains something. But I think when we say this is a country of immigrants, we're actually hiding as much as we're explaining. And okay, so let me try to explain that. So this is a country of immigrants. People have in mind Ellis Island. They have in mind the European immigrants. They have in mind the people who, under U.S. law, have been considered immigrants since really the founding of the country. And we need to think about how immigration and citizenship work together. That is, those who the law has considered immigrants are those who were considered to be potential citizens. Now, citizenship law in the United States restricted citizenship to white people until the Civil War, and after the Civil War, citizenship was restricted to white people and people of African descent. So those who were immigrants, so prior to the Civil War, many people who were not white were brought into the country, were physically present in the country, came into the country on their own, were conquered and incorporated into the country, but they could not be citizens. And they
let me stop it right there, because here we go with this birthright citizenship talk, and that's not what I necessarily want to talk about today. But however, it is important that we do recognize that when it came to the subject of the jurisdiction, immigrants particularly was not considered subject to the jurisdiction. And just take note of that while we continue watching.
They were not considered immigrants when they entered the country. The only ones who were considered immigrants were the Europeans. After the Civil War, not only is citizenship extended to people of African descent, none of whom are immigrating to the United States or coming to the United States in the aftermath of centuries of slavery and finally the war and the abolition of slavery. But other people, for example, the Chinese, who are coming into the country are still not eligible for citizenship. In fact, they're legally defined as racially ineligible to citizenship. And what really makes things complicated for immigration law is when citizenship by birth is created with the 14th Amendment in 1868, also in the aftermath of the Civil War. Because it creates this sort of logical impossibility that people who've been declared racially ineligible to citizenship, people who are not considered immigrants, even when they come to the country, they're considered workers but not immigrants, that they can then obtain access to citizenship by birth. And it's this logical impossibility of people who are legally defined as racially ineligible to citizenship, and then because of being physically present, able to obtain immigrant citizenship by birth, that leads Congress to start setting up restrictions on immigration and restrictions against people who are considered to be racially ineligible to citizenship. That is the Chinese and eventually all Asians, and Asia is very broadly defined under this law.
So, brief history. The Art case, which would allow the immigrant population to be considered somebody other than white people or Europeans to have birthright citizenship, was established under the Art case. And like I said, prior to that, the only people who were considered to be offered the ability to have citizenship in the United States were Europeans. And after the Civil War, it became black people, the former slaves. But yet again, that's not necessarily what I want to talk about. So here we are, we're dealing with this whole issue with regards to immigration. And we have got to take note that the whole issue with regards to immigration regarded people who were considered to be circular migration. And only people right here in which she's stating that were particularly able to have a birthright citizenship or citizenship in this country were considered those of European descent when it came to the immigrant. Everyone else were primarily considered workers. And so what we're dealing with right here, we're dealing with the possibilities of changing the course of history in which we are allowing individuals to stay in this country instead of having circular migration into where the individuals who came to work that came from opportunities don't want to go back home. They want to stay here. They want to live here permanently. They want to have all the necessary things instead of going back home to their families and stuff like that. And particularly, we seen the uprise of this with the Immigration Act of 1965, where individuals chose not to go back home, but were allowed to stay in the country, and the families that were over in other countries were kind of sponsored in, basically. But they were only supposed to be sponsored in for professional and high-skilled labor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chomsky, I wanted to ask you, in your introduction, you referred to a phrase that I've heard often from readers and callers, usually angry readers and callers to me at the Daily News, when they say, Mr. Gonzalez, what part of illegal don't you understand? And you raised the point that the concept of illegality in terms of immigration is actually a relatively new term in American history, and it's also been changed over time, and its use actually has always been racialized. Could you talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's part of the same system that I was describing before, that restricted immigration to white people and citizenship to white people, and then started to cut off immigration. But as immigration started to be restricted for groups including Asians and eventually even for Europeans who were considered to be inferior Europeans, like Southern and Eastern Europeans in the 1920s, Mexican border crossing was never restricted. And Mexican border crossing was never restricted because Mexican labor was so utterly necessary in the southwest of the United States, and because Mexicans were not considered immigrants, so therefore their immigration did not have to be restricted. They were considered to be workers, legally discriminated against on what were considered racial grounds, that is, they were racially so-called Mexican. That was perfectly legal. To deprive them of citizenship was perfectly legal, and the system worked from the perspective of maintaining the United States as a white country, because unlike the Asians, Mexican migration was generally a circular migration. That is, Mexicans came, worked for a season or a year or a couple of years, and returned to Mexico. So the history of border migrations for 150 years was one of circular migrations that were basically either completely unregulated or, as for example during 1942 and 1964, extended through 67, government-sponsored through the Bracero program, but migrations that denied citizenship and denied rights to the Mexicans who were in the country. So the creation of illegality and starting to call this migration illegal happens in 1965, really, when Mexican migration is for the first time considered to be immigration and is legally restricted. That is, a quota is put on Mexican migration, as it is on every country of the world. And in a situation where tens of thousands of Mexicans have been crossing the border legally and recruited and sometimes even coerced every year, all of a sudden this is made illegal. It's not stopped, but it's given a different name. Instead of calling it the Bracero program, it's called illegal migration. It's still just as necessary to the economy of the Southwest. It's still encouraged by all different sectors, but the discrimination against these workers is now justified by the introduction of this new terminology and status of illegality. How do I explain that? It's a little complicated.
And your point then is that once this new illegality for Mexican immigration begins post 65, then begins the criminalization of Mexicans as migrants. And you draw the parallel in your book with Michelle Alexander's book on mass incarceration and how the racialization that occurs. And she describes in her book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. This is Alexander speaking on Democracy.
So I'm going to stop it right there because we don't need to go in Michelle Alexander's part with regards to mass incarceration. Now, mass incarceration is starting to be a particular problem when it comes to the incarceration of those who they are calling illegal immigrants. However, what we got to understand at the same time is that first and foremost, the people that would come over from the southern border were never actually considered to be staying here permanently. I don't care if that's refugee. I don't care if it with the individuals with visas. That is not considered permanent immigration, right? These individuals were meant, and particularly when it comes to the Mexican immigrant, or the individuals who come from the border from Mexico, or Honduras, Guatemala, Venezuela. You know, if you didn't gain refugee status, you were considered to be over here primarily for work and economic purposes for the benefit of those in the United States. But we have a kind of a problem with this new current in which these individuals don't want to have circular migration. They want to stay in this country and they don't want to go back home. So this is a particular problem that we are seeing with now, where the Trump administration, they trying to get these people out who have overstayed their welcome, who don't want to go back, and particularly who they don't want to go back, and they particularly are taking so many jobs away from. They're building generational wealth, which is not a problem, but it's not allowing others to build that same generation. They're in competition with the United States citizen more than being the helper to the U.S. economy, and it's not balancing itself out. So, for instance, like the whole idea with when it comes to circular migration and allowing immigrants to come over across the border, and particularly like things like circular migration, is for like seasonal work. Seasonal work is, and I don't want to be stereotypical when it comes to this, but when you think about seasonal work, you need to think about how just certain things during the season that needs more of a facilitation of employment than others. So during that season, particularly say for instance, like the construction field, during the summertime construction, plays a big part because there's a lot more sun. In the wintertime, you would like to see less construction going on because, there's more of a work hazard. But if we having a big boom in construction where we needing a lot of employees for construction, and we don't have a lot of individuals trained in the United States at the moment to fill the gap with regards to construction, then we would allow immigrants to come over and fill that gap. It'll help us out economically, particularly because we're trying to basically fill those gaps in the workforce, right? But also, it's supposed to help the bottom line of the corporation. So these individuals would come over for less pay, and that's for one. And because of the less pay, the job will end up costing less to complete, which makes the product more consumable to the U.S. citizen. Listen, here we are, we getting caught up in the matrix with regards to this whole ICE and Donald Trump, particularly trying to get people to go back home and not stay in this country. But the whole idea of the American system and how it's worked in the past has been for circular migration to happen. Not for these individuals to come over here undocumented or overstay their welcome through a visa program, through a refugee status, through whatever else type of program. So what we have going on right now, we have in the Democratic Party having us being stuck in the matrix when it comes to sanctuary states and sanctuary cities, because ultimately what sanctuary cities and sanctuary states do, they tell the quote unquote illegal immigrant, the individuals who's supposed to have circular migration, to stay here permanently instead of being removed and going back to a particular country when it's time or when the work is over with. So you always hearing about, oh yeah, they some good workers and all that. Yeah, we are some good workers. They just do the jobs that we probably primarily don't want to do, right? That was the first key. But now you've seen them in here doing the jobs that we want to do, like in the construction field, like welding, like electricians and stuff like that. And they taking those jobs away because they're staying here permanently year round instead of coming over here for seasonal work. Sanctuary cities is a primary benefactor to the illegal immigrant when it comes. Sanctuary states and sanctuary cities is the primary benefactor to allowing individuals to stay over here permanently. However, when we get down to the nuts and bolts about it, it's not necessarily just, that it's not necessarily just that it's the whole idea of sanctuary state. There is a reason why sanctuary states were developed. And this is, let me take you over to something else, right? Because this is the talk they use. This is how they get us stuck in the matrix, right? Every few decades, Democrats tap into the whole populist current, sometimes rural, sometimes urban, sometimes economic, sometimes inclusive. The target changes, but the message stays familiar. And there's always the term in which they would like to use, such as, these people deserve better than what we're giving them. And this is the whole rhetoric when it comes to sanctuary states, by allowing these individuals to stay over here permanently, who necessarily throughout the history, as you just seen from Democracy Now, was not meant to stay here permanently. So let me take you over here to a brief history with regards to sanctuary states. The whole making of sanctuary states, because sanctuary states started in the state of California under Governor Jerry Brown. And this is the reason why primarily these individuals was supposed to be coming over here to this country. Excuse me, not coming over here to this country, but the development of the sanctuary state. So let me take you over here as soon as I can get to this, because I've been doing my little research. But it's the reason why I've been doing my research is for educational purposes to also teach you on how we're caught up in the matrix. We got people out here dying in places such as Minnesota without understanding the history with regards to that. So that first piece by Democracy Now! Was very important. Let me see, where is that? Let me see if I can take you over here to the right situation, and then we're gonna take a look at here we are. So this is another piece, right? These are the changes that
Hey, boss, can you move the car off the street, please? ¿Le puedes mover a la banqueta, por favor?
So this is to give you a clear understanding of why sanctuary cities and sanctuary states were put in place. The sanctuary policies were put in place as what they're telling you in telling you in terms of the Democratic Party. What they've been telling you is that it was to protect the immigrant. It was to protect the immigrant from fears of deportation when it comes to reporting crimes.
What? Gracias.
In a city of 4 million residents, an estimated 500,000 in Los Angeles are undocumented.
When they first come over, most people, hey, the police, we're gonna get deported, we're gonna get deported, and so that fear is always there.
That fear is something that Los Angeles Police Captain Alfred Labrada knows well.
I came here undocumented many years ago in this country, and as a young child, and lived in some of that fear that I think some of the community is.
Labrada got his U.S. citizenship after joining the military. He says
he got his U.S. citizenship after joining the military. After joining the military, he went through a process of actually gaining citizenship. He didn't just hide out. He didn't hide out. You know what I'm saying? He didn't when he became of age, after coming over here, even though his parents might have been, still be undocumented, when he had the opportunity, he joined the military to gain citizenship. So there is ways to gain citizenship. Why individuals refuse to take those advantages to gain citizenship, that's up to them, right? But you can't deny that there's no pathways being given to earn citizenship when you come over here to this country.
fear of deportation is heightened because of the Trump administration's tough stance.
And I understand some of the fears that are occurring in the country, and I see it. A lot of the parents have, for a time being, some kept their children from schools.
There are also fewer calls to the police. Labrada says there has been a 10% drop in domestic violence calls and 25% drop in sexual assault calls.
So that's worrisome to us. We don't know if there's less crimes occurring or they're just fearful of reporting because they still fear that we're going to notify ICE.
But in reality, when it comes to a person's immigration status, Labrada says LAPD does not work with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, because residents need to trust their police.
And if they don't feel comfortable calling us because they think we're going to call ICE, they think we're going to deport them, then we're not going to get calls for service. We're going to have victimized.
But ICE said in a statement that this point of view is wrong-headed, and law enforcement is posing the greater threat to public safety by not working with ICE.
California has a law that provides protection to undocumented immigrants called the Trust Act.
The Trust Act, in essence, said that county jails and California law enforcement is only to proactively turn over those folks who meet certain serious crime status. And so if you don't meet that status, then by California law, we are not to notify ICE of their existence or participation in the jail.
Bordering LA County, more conservative Orange County is chafing under the Trust Act. Its sheriff requested that President Trump help them better cooperate with ICE.
That they put the mechanisms in place, whether they do that through some executive order or some other opportunity that may be something less than that they can effectuate that with. But what she's asking is for them to take the proactive step to empower us to hold them in custody until they are turned over.
For now, the immigration status of the people coming into the Orange County jail will be noted, but only if they are convicted of a serious crime will ICE be notified. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News, Los Angeles.
So there you have it, right? It was the making of starting to begin to allow individuals to be considered to have a permanent status in this country while retaining the ability to be undocumented, while retaining the ability to not even participate in the process of even, trying to gain a citizenship. And this is something that we have to recognize with regards to sanctuary cities. So instead of them coming into the country, going back, coming into the country, making money, sending the money back home, these individuals chose to stay. And like when you look at the Immigration Act of 1965, it pretty much began from there, right? Because now you have these individuals that came over here for work, not wanting to go home, are becoming sponsors, so more individuals to come over here. So the impact we got to first recognize with regards to the sanctuary state policies was to protect the illegal immigrant from fears of deportation when they wanted to report themselves or report themselves as being victims of crime or be witnesses to victims of crime, right? But if you're going to be a witness to a victim of crime, of course they're not going to want to deport you. Okay, they're not going to want to, they're not going to want to just let a witness go somewhere where they can't find them. Even in that case, you're going to be able to receive some type of visa. What particular visa, I don't know. I'm going to take you somewhere else because what we're trying to get to in this instance, we're trying to get out of this whole idea of being caught up in the matrix to the rhetoric in which the Democratic Party has gotten us in. With regards to going out here and protest without really understanding the history with regards to what's going on. So it's important that on today's show, welcome to the Trumped Up Live Show, by the way. I'm your host, Tiny Cross-H.U.G. Always remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell, and also leave some comments. And it's all about being a soldier. So to all you viewers out there, it is a good day to be a soldier. But let's get out this matrix at the same time. I'm going to take you over to something else. Because along with the California Values Act, which is known as the Sanctuary State Act, or the Sanctuary State Policies, under the Trust Act, we have the Truth Act, which is kind of like a policy that is adjacent to the whole idea of sanctuary state policies. But I want to hear you. While we're going out here, while you have ICE going out here in search for criminals, because one of the problems you got to realize is this, though, right? These individuals are, first of all, a lot of immigrants, they don't come over here to necessarily just work. They come over here just in search of any opportunities. And some of them opportunities necessarily has to do with, prostitution, human trafficking, running drugs, committing crimes against people such as robberies and burglaries and all this other stuff, domestic violence. And one of the particular reasons that they try to know with regards to the sanctuary state policies was that individuals were the wives of these individuals. A lot of them were subjected to domestic violence, but didn't want to call ICE because they will be in fear of deportation. I want to take you on to the true fact right quick because I'm trying to draw a point here.
There are constitutional threats from a reckless Trump administration. Senate Bill 54 protects our local law enforcement and the resources that they need to keep our communities safe.
Well, I think if you look at this bill, I think it's a model. And
Hold on, that's not the correct one. That's not the correct one. We're gonna go back over here real fast. Excuse me, this laptop I have is kind of old, but it works in my whole setup. One of my systems actually only able to get, work. It works best from here. On this laptop, that is.
Today, I stand with immigrants, legal service providers, and organized labor.
Immigrants, legal service providers, and organized labor. Immigrants, legal service providers, and organized labor. What does organized labor have to do with any of this? I'm gonna tell you what it has to do with all of this, because as I was saying from at the beginning, you cut the bottom line costs for the labor force. If you are allowed to pay workers at a lower wage and you get the job done at the same time, you have a returning product in which you are allowed to make items more consumable for the consumer, the U.S. citizen.
To unveil the transparent review of unjust transfers and holds, or the Truth Act. California's immigrants...
No, the Truth Act, not the Trust Act. Now this is the Truth Act. They work hand in hand under sanctuary state policies, and this is in California, by the way.
Form an integral part of our state's social fabric. But when Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, coerces local law enforcement into carrying out deportations, families are separated and community trust destroyed. In addition, undocumented witnesses and victims are afraid to step forward or seek help.
So, hold on, what does that have to do with the labor force? Why does that have to do with the labor force? Because the labor force want these individuals not to be seasonal. They want them to be permanent.
The Truth Act builds upon California's Trust Act, which was signed by Governor Brown in 2013 and which I was very proud to support. Prior to the Trust Act, ICE requested local jails hold community members until they could be picked up for deportation. Following Governor Brown's signature, community members were protected from such holds unless they were convicted of certain more serious crimes. After the Trust Act went into effect, ICE undermined the law by requesting local law enforcement notify them of personal information such as release time, so they could be waiting with a white man to pick up our immigrant community members.
So understand what he's saying right here. So let's go back to Michelle Alexander. Let me give you a little take of Michelle Alexander's book. If you're on some type of supervision in the United States, if you're on some type of supervision in the United States, what you have is you have a heightened responsibility to be that much more good, that much of abiding by the social contract, to not have any type of contact with the penal system. And that's with regards to the police. That's with regards to the penal system in terms of not breaking any laws, ensuring that you don't go back to prison. But here we are here, right? We allow individuals who come over here to this country, and this is what he's saying. He allowed individuals to come over here to this country and not be subjected to what you subject your citizens to. All right. I just gave the description of what you subject your citizens to, is particularly with the heightened responsibility that they have when they become a part of the, the penal system, right? Or they've been to prison, they've been to jail, and this and that and the other, right? They've done their time, but still they are not allowed to have any contact with the police, right? However, these individuals, they can go to jail. They don't have a high responsibility for themselves in regards to being in the country as guests, right? Into not having no contact with the police. They are selling drugs. Let's get it right. They're selling drugs. They're abusing their wives. And I'm just not saying all of them, right? So because don't get that wrong. There is a lot of good people who come over here and look for the opportunities to work and actually do a good job at doing that, right? But look at the switch that's been taking place, where these individuals don't even have to have the heightened sense of responsibility to stay within the social contract that we have in this country to be law-abiding citizens. And they get to be able to do that without fear of deportation. Now, if your citizen has to have a heightened sense of responsibility with regards to not going to prison, all right, not going back to prison, all right, the recidivism level is so high in this country, which creates mass incarceration. So what's the difference between these same individuals who should have a heightened responsibilities to be law-abiding citizens in this country in terms of being in fear of deportation? Then in that case, if you have all these individuals in jail, what you should be able to see is mass deportation, and it should be taking place within the jail system, because these individuals, of course, have already established that what they don't have is the responsibility to be guests into your home. One thing that you got to note, that if you are a guest in somebody else's house, you have got to be the most respectful person there. If you don't have a sense of respect, person is ready to kick you out, right or wrong. If you don't have a sense of respect for somebody else's house, a person is be ready to kick you out of their house. So what is the difference? And look at the rhetoric of how we're keeping individuals here for the sake of a labor force. For the sake of a labor force. So who are these individuals particularly really working for? While they are preaching the whole idea of being able to allow these individuals to have trust with law enforcement to be able to report crime. And then they going in and talking about the labor force. Hold on, I thought it was supposed to be about allowing these individuals. What does that have to do with these people having the heightened responsibility to be law-abiding people while they're a guest in another nation?
With the Truth Act, we close that loophole. We require much-needed transparency from ICE. We make sure local communities have a voice, and we create clear guidelines to guard against these abuses. The Truth Act establishes a transparent process, including community engagement, prior to local law enforcement participating in ICE deportation programs. Local law enforcement must then reach an agreement with their city council or county supervisors, dictating the terms and conditions of any participation in such programs and compliance with the state's Trust Act. In short, ICE has undermined the Trust Act, and in doing so, undermined the trust in our communities. Behind me stand some of the victims of ICE. Pedro Figueroa, was a victim of car theft. A victim. And when he sought help from the San Francisco Police Department, he ended up in custody. We will hear his story directly in his words later in this press conference. Maria Hernandez is a domestic violence survivor who was afraid to go to the police for fear of deportation.
Still, what does work has to do with this? What does work has to do with this? You know what I'm saying? Everyone knows that, immigration is supposed to have a support with regards to the economy. This is all about the Percetto program that you heard with regards to Democracy Now! Even with the Europeans with regards to Ellis Island. We understand that these people shouldn't be deported for, reporting themselves as victims of crime. We get that point. But what about these individuals that you're talking about are in prison, not only in prison, but are going to jail within the system? You don't want to hand these people over to ICE. You want to release these individuals back permanently into the system without them having the heightened responsibility of being in another person's home.
And leaving her 3 children without a mother. We will also hear from Ms. Hernandez shortly. Dean Santos, like me, came to the U.S. from the Philippines as a boy. His mother brought him here when he was 12 years old, and she sacrificed everything to give him a better life. 5 years ago, he made the biggest mistake of his life when he was arrested for petty theft in San Mateo County, taking Christmas presents for his friends, 2 hats and a couple wallets. The day Dean was supposed to get out, he was taken by ICE and sent to an immigration prison in Arizona. Dean was one of the lucky ones. He received legal assistance, was released, and has gone on to community college and university. He's there today because he wants to make sure that others, he's here today because he wants to make sure that others are given the opportunity he was given to contribute back to our society. And then there's the story of Guillermo Hernandez, who can't be here today because he's locked in a federal immigration facility. Instead of looking forward to his marriage, which was scheduled on Valentine's Day, he's now facing a deportation hearing because he visited a casino as a 20-year-old and was arrested for trespassing. Guillermo's marriage on Monday will be the first gay marriage from within a federal immigration facility. Some of these people have made mistakes, but those mistakes should not jeopardize their future in the country they have come to call home. This is California, the most diverse state in the nation, the most progressive state in the nation. In California, we don't build walls, we tear them down. We won't stand by and allow our California families to be destroyed and our neighbors, friends, and family members to be victimized. With the Truth Act,
listen, y'all have got to be able to pick through the rhetoric of these statutory programs with regards to not statutory programs, but the policies with regards to sanctuary state and city programs to allow you to offer you to realize that they taken individuals who were supposed to be over here on a case-by-case basis first and foremost. They weren't supposed to be over here with regards to unlawful entry, coming over here, crossing the border, being able to work. They're supposed to be able to get a work visa. This is how this has worked. Supposed to be able to get a work visa. And if, like I said, if they get into trouble, when they come over here and don't have a heightened responsibility with regards to themselves and being in another person's home, I know if somebody came in my house, violated me, I know for one thing for sure, depending on the violation, not only is he gonna get kicked out, but he might get something else in the process. And that goes for their home. That goes for anybody else's home. You know what I'm saying? One thing, there is certain line of respect that you need to have when you're on somebody else's home. Is it right or wrong? So you're going to sit here and you're going to protect them and allow these individuals to victimize U.S. citizens instead of sending them back. And this is why I think there has been listen, in California, the majority of gangs in California are Hispanic gangs. They're not even black gangs. While black people are a lot of times depicted as the most individuals who are considered to be gang members, and that's like the number one thing that's being advocated in the United States is for black men to be gang members. You know what I'm saying? Just based on the stereotype, like we don't have the intelligence to do nothing else. And there was a point to where we considered the fact that being starting a gangbang, and especially in like the 2000s, the early 2000s, if you were deciding to be a gang member in the 2000s, you were not considered a real gang member. That started to hatch up, and then what we had an influx. We had an influx to where I don't want to necessarily say. It's just that if they're going to be organized with regards to gang, what you think that makes us do as, another fashion of gang members? And I'm not just talking about street stuff, right? I'm just talking about if the early 2000s, it was a lot of stuff going on. So with regards to, other racial gangs, right? So what do you think had to happen in order to prevent, the black people in Los Angeles from being abused? Okay, but here's the thing also as well, because what I brought up earlier was with regards to how the Biden administration had allowed so many people over, and had allowed so many people over into the country after COVID-19. After COVID-19, and that was in order to help reinvigorate the economy. So before we log off today, we need to go over here and check this out. Because what you're going to see is you're going to see another demonstration of how immigration is supposed to work in this country when it comes to, refugees, visas, the whole thought of circular migration. And you think about, like, why did President Biden allow so many people to come over here? First of all, he, was so angry at Trump. And, him and Trump is going back and forth with regards to their policies right now. A lot of times it's being taken away. Trump is taking away Biden policies, Biden-era policies, but Biden at the same time has taken away a lot of Trump-era policies. Oh, no, we got to get to this document. We have got to get to this document because this is going to lock it in, and it got to be this one. What's going on? It don't want to open up for me at the moment. Let me click the other end. All right, so let's go over here and check this document out, because we gonna wrap this up, and we gonna get you caught up out the matrix. We gonna use this as a teaching mechanism. Hold on, just a minute. Let me. Where we at? We're going to use this as a teaching mechanism so you don't go out there fighting with ICE and against ICE, while the Democrats has manufactured this whole issue and to allow the labor unions to have these people over here more permanent so they can help their bottom lines out when it comes to immigration. So this right here, this study, this was a, let me see, can y'all see that? Let me see if I can add a little bit more. Okay, so the consequences of failure, how the Biden's policies fueled the border crisis. A testimony before Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement, the United States House of Representatives, in March 25th, 2025, by Laura Rise, I think her name is. This is regards the Border Security and Immigration Center with regards to the Heritage Center. So in this document right here, what you'll find out is that more recently, Trump had removed immigration parole system that was created under the Biden administration during the Biden term. That was created during the Biden term. All right. Because what I should do right now before we go into this document, what I should go into right now before I go into this document is actually allowing you to take a look at what I'm talking about with Donald Trump actually removing this Biden era policy. That started under Biden. Donald Trump removed this this immigration parole system and told individuals that they would have to go back home. I'm gonna show you the times when this particular thing started to happen, but also I'm gonna make it be consistent with regards to how the immigration policies have always worked, in this country. When thinking about immigration as a source of labor. Let's go to here.
The Department of Homeland Security began issuing termination notices to migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela who entered the U.S. under a Biden-era policy that parole and work authorizations are revoked effective immediately. CBS's Miami's Larry Seward is live in Doral with reaction to all of this. Larry.
Jim, Homeland Security's Assistant Secretary said migrants abuse this program and ending it is common sense policy. People we met here tonight, though, mostly feel afraid.
Outside El Arepaiso in Doral, Judith Calderon's worries about her neighbors flowed near the gas pump. Emails from Homeland Security warned Cubans, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, and Haitians here with special permission to leave the country or face deportation.
It's heartbreaking. I have a lot of patients that are under the same, situations, and there's just tearing people apart, tearing families apart.
The move upsets Paul Christian Damfrey too. He works with South Florida's Family Action Network. They help migrants here adjust to life and chase the American dream.
You are basically driving a dagger into the heart of the entire community, because these are mixed status families that are going to be torn apart.
2 years ago, more than 500,000 people facing crisis in their homeland landed in the U.S. with permission through a parole program created by the Biden administration. President Trump canceled that program, and last month the U.S. Supreme Court upheld that decision.
They are moving forward because the Supreme Court said they don't have to wait for the entire case to be litigated. They're able to move forward now.
That means people in the program immediately lost legal status. South Florida Congresswoman Sheila Shirtless McCormick feels it's an attack on communities she represents.
What it's going to do is actually impact us economically. Most of these workers are people who...
Brown did not want to speak on camera out of fear. One man told us he worries about being followed or questioned
to be litigated.
The Shirtless McCormick feels it's an attack on communities she represents.
What it's going to do is actually impact us economically. Most of
You see what I'm saying? Why they consistently go when it comes to illegal immigration? Why they all consistently go back to the economy, the economy, the economy, the economy? You see Governor Gavin Newsom, he always go back to the economy, how the immigrant has became 39% of California's workforce. And if you get rid of the immigrant, then what is California going to do in terms of its workforce? Now, I don't know what you guys going to do, right? But you have got to stop the rhetoric with regards to allowing the populace to allow y'all to rewrite the rule books on how the immigration system actually was particularly supposed to work in the country. Now, like I said, some people who come into the country, yeah, they have the means of being able to have access into a process of gaining citizenship. However, you got people that don't even want to go through that process to gain that rights to citizenship. They're over here not going. If you want to stay over here permanently, then why aren't you going through the process to gain your actual citizenship in the United States instead of in another country? And why should these individuals come in from a situation to where it's making the United States citizens seem like they don't have the ability to work or do the jobs that they do? That's second of all. It's making us seem like we're lazy, like we don't want to do nothing. We're like we're just some just lazy people. I'm just gonna leave it like that. So, what Trump is trying to do right now is restore the American ethos with regards to having a distinction with regards for every United States citizen to have a title. And what do I mean by title? I mean by doctor, lawyer, electrician, welder. All these is titles which give you a distinction in this country and something that you can be proud of, and not be proud of it in terms of how you came into the country, but your loyalty is still to another country. Your loyalty should be to the United States when it comes to the title that you have established in this country as you look around and you see all of the things that you have built, especially in terms of construction. Now, when you say immigrants built this country, yeah, okay, well, if that what you believe, but when you look at the United States Constitution, you don't see nothing but a white person's and a black person's history. All throughout the Constitution, all you see is a white and a black man's history. A black woman, a black man, a white woman, and a white man. You do not see no other person's history within that United States Constitution for something that you particularly built. And that's not to be racial, but we got to stop that kind of talk. You just been allowed over here for the purpose of work, the purpose of the economy, to help booster the economy, particularly in an age where we're losing a lot of our baby boomers are getting out of the workforce. So here you are, you're able to come in and fill a gap. But it's not our fault if you come in and fill that gap, and if you don't go through the process of becoming a citizen. If you want to be here so much, and not only that, it's not our fault when you come into the system and you abuse the system, and you abuse the system for one. That's a whole nother issue. But you don't have the heightened responsibility that you're a guest in somebody else's country and you're here violating the laws to get you incarcerated or in prison somehow, and here you are because of the economic trends that's going on in terms of our politicians being communicative or paid or whatever by, the source of labor, not the source of labor, but the people who actually given the jobs. here you are, we come up with this sanctuary state policy, the sanctuary city policy to ask you, have you remain, without you ever going through that process of becoming a United States citizen and not even wanting to, because your loyalty is still to your country. All right, so that's that right there with regards to what Trump just did with the Biden era policy. But let's go over here, because you got to see how high this runs up. You got to see how high this runs up. This is the immigration parole system, which you just got through seeing in that last clip, right? We're just going to read it, and I'm going to break it down for you after this. So in addition to opening the border and ignoring immigration enforcement studies, Mayorkas has violated the immigration benefit statute passed by Congress in the Immigration and Nationality Act. The most blatant of these violations was his use of immigration parole. The INA statute, the INA states that the Secretary of Homeland Security may, in his discretion, parole into the United States temporarily circular migration, only on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. What was significant public benefit? At the time that the Biden administration pretty much enacted this policy with regards to immigration parole, we just came or was beginning to come out of the COVID-19 shutdown. The COVID-19 shutdown just happened between the spring and summer of 2021. Remember that number. Significant public benefit: any alien applying for admissions to the United States, but such parole of such alien shall not be regarded as an admission of the alien, and when the purpose of such parole, but such parole of such alien shall not be regarded as an admission of the alien, and when the purpose of such parole shall, in the opinion of the Secretary, have been served, the alien shall forthwith return or be returned to the custody from which he was paroled, and thereafter his case shall continue to be dealt with in the manner same as that of any other applicant for admission to the United States. Congress later added the following statutory language to prevent the abuse of parole to bring refugees into the U.S. more quickly. The Secretary may not parole into the United States an alien who is a refugee unless the Secretary determines that compelling reasons in the public interest with respect to the particular alien requires that the alien be paroled into the United States rather than be admitted as a refugee under Section 1157 of the title. Congress intended that parole would be used very rarely in special circumstances when an alien does not have adequate time to use the legal visa or refugee process, for example, when coming to the U.S. for emergency surgery or to testify in criminal cases. Therefore, Congress logically did not provide work authorizations for aliens who receive temporary parole. Hold on, wait, bear with me, because it's going to get more into it with regards to the work authorization. Despite this clear statutory text, Mayorkas repeatedly used mass and categorical parole to allow tens of thousands of inadmissible aliens to bypass our lawful visa and refugee process each month. He created parole programs for aliens from Afghanistan, Colombia, Cuba, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, Ukraine, Venezuela, as well as aliens who have previously been deported and aliens who have resided in the U.S. illegally for the past 10 years and married to U.S. citizens. So one thing that you need to take note with regards to this is that why would he bypass Mexico? If Mexico has been one of the key aspects in where you had things like the Bracero program going on where there was circular migration, right? Then why would you bypass Mexico? And I had to look at that, but when I continued on, I realized that, and this is where we're going to get into this graph. So let's get into the next paragraph. So why would Biden bypass Mexico in order to get these refugees, or to bypass the visa and refugee program in order to get some additional people in with regards to the public benefit? And like I said, at the time, the public benefit was the reopening up of the economy when it came to COVID-19. In addition, Mayorkas created a parole program under which any alien can use the CBP Mobile One application to make an appointment at land or airports of entry, not the southern border, where CBP paroled them into the U.S. In other words, instead of securing the border, the Biden administration created a deceptive shell game by shifting the illegal flow to the ports, the red segment in the chart below. This is that red segment in the chart. While pointing at briefly falling numbers of alien crossing the southern border between these ports of entry, the southern border is the orange. The ones who is coming through land and airports are in the red. Secretary Mayorkas also gave his mass parolees renewable work authorizations without congressional authorization. He propagandized his bypass of sanctuary visa and refugee processes as expanding lawful pathways and insisted that parole was granted on a case-by-case basis. Federal judges, however, have found otherwise. For example, the Fifth Circuit of Court of Appeals rebuked DHS's abuse of parole in its December 2021 decision regarding the secretary termination. So of the migrant protection program. So the court held that deciding to parole aliens en masse is the opposite of case-by-case decision-making, and added that DHS pretended power to parole aliens while ignoring the limitations Congress imposed on parole powers is not non-enforceable, but misenforceable suspension of INA or both. So pretty much what he did was he overrided the what Congress have enacted with regards to the Immigration and Nationality Act by allowing individuals over here with regards to immigration parole to spark up the economy, because like I said, what you had individuals who didn't want to go back to work for the same employers after COVID-19 had happened. And the reason why they didn't want to go back to the same employers that the COVID-19 that happened was because, for one, they were hurt. They had got fired after spending 10, 20, 15 years on the job. The economy shut down. So when the economy opened back up, people wanted more, whether it was to create their own business or go seek better secured opportunities elsewhere. So Biden, with the understanding of this, here we are. We're going to replace them out of the workforce, and we're going to go ahead and offer in a whole lot of immigrant parolees. Look at the charts. So when you think about how immigrants, why are all the immigrants getting up all these jobs? Why are they getting up all the jobs and we ain't able to find jobs and work and do all this other stuff? First of all, you got to understand, like I said, this is what they were meant to do. What is not meant for them to do was not to be circularly migrating for sanctuary state policies to keep these people in this country and prevent them from going back home, even when they violated our penal system. It's one thing to protect individuals from the ability to be deported when they're victims of crime. No, we don't want individuals to be victims of crime. We want to respect every individual that comes to this country. However, when you even want to protect the criminal from going back home, those who do not have the respect for your home, who come in, putting trash everywhere, probably broke something. I'm just giving you, similarities. Would you allow somebody to come up into your house and tear up your stuff? So let me break it down for you a little bit more, right? Because you got to understand why the economy is so important with regards to this. The economy is so important because these individuals, not only do sometimes they come and do jobs that necessarily Americans don't want to do, when it's hard to find that work. All right. But when they come, when they come to stay, here they are, they taking over some of these jobs permanently when that gap is being filled. And so here, these individuals are, when they come in search of opportunity, of course, I just count it as this. Anybody who really needs opportunity gonna really work hard in the achievement of having that opportunity. It don't matter what race. It don't matter what race that individual is. Anybody, that's why Trump is talking about a merit system. And black people, you cannot forget all of what you put into this country with regards to a merit system. You've survived in this country with regards to merit. You didn't survive in this country with regards to the social programs, the welfares, all that other stuff. You know what I'm saying? I know some people, now it's like a thing to brag about. We were going to the grocery store with your EBT card. That used to be like an embarrassment, even for white people. However, the way that we survive in this country with regards to merit, that was all about what the civil rights movement was about. Equal rights, equal protection. All right, to be just like you, receiving the same opportunities. So for everybody to have opportunities in this country, you have to remember that certain people just can't stay. Everybody just can't be able to stay and have all the same opportunities that the citizen is supposed to have. But it works out like based on merit, Trump wants to deliver to the country back the ethos of the country so people can have the titles that are being given to illegal immigrants. But when you have the people like the Democratic Party who are looking to help more of the populace just so they can gain control for party instead of looking at the American citizen as the people who necessarily need to be helped. That's why you see them fighting for the illegal immigrants so much more, because they working hand in hand with these corporations to keep these people up over here. And you get to a point to where you see places like California with 39%. But here how this thing is supposed to work. And this is why it is not working. Let me break it down for you why is immigration such a problem right now? First of all, they're taking up a lot of the social welfare programs that generally supposed to be offered to citizens. Next, you got crime. You got these people coming over here and they bring in crime into the system, and it's impacting the everyday lives of, everybody. When it comes to crime, you got so many gangs out here with regards to having loyalty to the Mexican mafia and the cartel, things like that, whether it's Trinidad Wagwa from Venezuela. You got rings of gangs out here that is specifically targeted towards human smuggling and stuff like that. So there's a crime element. There's the element that your tax dollars is being spent, and your tax dollars is being spent in order to take care of these people. There's the element of they are supposed to be making things cheaper. Here's where the collide is at. After COVID-19, things got more expensive. This is why it's not working, and this is why people want to see the illegal. Why are we paying so much to have these people in this country, and the cost of living is going up? First of all, we got to think on basic economics when it comes to housing. If these individuals are buying up houses, if the demand for housing is high, but the supply is low, then costs are going to go up. Another reason for housing costs to go up is so many organizations, larger organizations, are buying up a lot of single-family homes. But the reason why this is not working at the time is not necessarily that that there is a problem with immigrants being over here. There's a problem with them not going back home. They're taking American jobs, but they're not making lives that much more cheaper in the economy. They're not stopping inflation from happening. They're contributing when you want to keep these people in this country permanently, what you're going to have to be able to give them a wage for them to stay, just like you would have to give the average American the ability to pay with a livable wage. And if they're receiving it, if your citizen is not receiving that livable wage, then people are going to start to be like, hey, wait a minute, hold on, what happened? So they are intended to be in a workforce to make things cheaper. For instance, like I would go back into saying products, the end product to the consumer should be cheaper, because the bottom line for the business was able to get cut down because they were allowed to get a cheaper workforce. So if they hired individuals and paid them less to complete a job, then the end product that goes to the consumer is not as expensive than you would if you were to hire these other individuals, or like an American citizen. See, this is where it's not working, because during the Biden era, what you saw was everything doubling. So get out of the rhetoric about what they are trying to do with regards to sanctuary states, sanctuary cities, because it's a way for them to violate the immigration practices that already been happening. And you can see right there, that was under the Immigration and Nationality Act, a direct violation. And the sanctuary state thing is doing it the same thing when they're not giving the opportunity for a circular migration. You come in, you help out, you go back home. You come in, you help out, you go back home. We gonna help you out, get the opportunity. However, here you want to stay. And we gonna help you out, get the opportunity. We gonna help you send that money back home so you can take care of your family back home. We gonna give you the opportunity, but go back home. But the problem is you're not going back home. You're trying to stay. the idea of circular migration is depleted when you have sanctuary state and sanctuary city policies. Tiny Cross-H.U.G on the Trumped Up Live show. It's a good day to be a soldier. See you next time.